Okay, so in these next lessons here, what we're going to do is we are going to talk about organic compounds, and we're going to learn how to name organic compounds. Organic compounds. Now, the word organic, I can think of several different meanings for the word organic. Like the word organic, they apply to food, right? Which means it's like food that's been grown without like pesticides or something like that. That's not what we're talking about, right? What we're talking about, the word organic in chemistry means carbon. Okay? Organic compounds are compounds of the element carbon. Carbon is a very special element. Carbon is kind of unique. Carbon can make 4 different covalent compounds, right? And that makes it a very unique element because it can form millions and millions and millions of different compounds, right? And we're going to talk about how to name some of these compounds. Compounds that contain, are built on carbon atoms are called organic compounds, and that's what we're talking about here. Let's see. There are millions and millions of known organic compounds. What we're going to talk about first here, we're going to talk about a type of organic compound called a hydrocarbon. Okay, the hydrocarbon is an organic compound that contains only hydrogen and carbon. Right? So we're going to talk about hydrocarbons for the first part here, and we're gonna learn how to name some simple hydrocarbons. And then in the next lesson, we'll go on and we'll learn about some more complex hydrocarbons. So let's go ahead and let's talk about naming hydrocarbons. Let's talk for a second here about what carbon kind of often does. Right? Carbon is unique because it can make 4 different covalent bonds. Okay? So if I have a carbon atom, it can make 4 different bonds, right? Maybe one of these bonds is a double bond and then it makes 3 other bonds. Maybe one of these bonds is a triple bond and then makes only 1 other bond, right? But it can make 4 different bonds. And consider, what if that carbon were to make a bond with another carbon, right? Well, that carbon can make 4 different bonds. 1, 2, 3, 4. What if that one made a bond with another carbon atom? And so forth, right? I mean, how long can I do this? I could do this all day, right? What carbon likes to do is carbon likes to make long chains of carbon atoms. And what a hydrocarbon is it's just carbon and hydrogen. So all these places where I don't have an element yet, in a hydrocarbon, those would be filled with hydrogen atoms. So here's a hydrocarbon. One thing we need to understand about hydrocarbons before we start naming them is that we kind of split them into 3 different categories, okay? They're called alkanes, alkenes, and alkynes. They're all 1 letter different, right? A-E-Y. Alkane, alkene, and alkyne. Alkanes, with the A, are hydrocarbons that contain only single bonds between the carbon atoms, right? An alkene is a hydrocarbon that's got at least 1 double bond between carbon atoms. And an alkyne with a Y has at least 1 triple bond between carbon atoms, right? So if you look at this one, you can tell this one is an alkane with an A because there are no double bonds and there are no triple bonds. Okay? And it's going to be important to be able to identify which is which as we name them. Okay? To name a simple hydrocarbon, first you need to know, is it alkane, alkene, or alkyne? Right? This one is alkane with an A. And then what we need to do is we need to determine how many carbon atoms are in that particular compound, right? So if I look at my compound, I count up my carbon atoms. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, there are prefixes for the number of carbon atoms. Here's a chart that tells you what the prefix is depending on the number of carbon atoms. So if I have 1 carbon atom, the prefix is meth. If I had 2, it's ath. 3, pro. 4, bute. This is 4, right? So the prefix that I'm going to use is bute. Okay. Now, we're going to add a suffix onto that to say whether it's alkane, alkene, or alkyne. Okay. If it's an alkane, we're going to add A-N-E. If it's an alkene, we're going to add E-N-E. If it's an alkyne, we're going to add Y-N-E. Since this is alkane, I'm going to add A-N-E. And so the name of this compound is butane. Sometimes when we're drawing the hydrocarbons here, we just don't put the hydrogens down. We just kind of understand that they're at the end of those bonds. We don't bother going around and writing all the little H's. So let's say we're looking at this one here. Oriented differently, but everything is exactly the same, right? Let's count the number of carbons and see what our prefix is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And what is the prefix for 6? Hex. Okay. Now let's figure out what our suffix is. Is it alkane, alkene, or alkyne? It's alkane. So the suffix is ane. So that right there is called hexane. When we get into alkenes and alkynes, there are some other considerations. Let's take a look at some of that. Let's take a look at this one here. You can see in this one we have a double bond, right? And notice that when we have that double bond, this carbon now does not have a hydrogen right here. And this carbon now does not have a hydrogen right here because, that counts as 2 bonds. So there's 2, 3, 4, and it's all done. It can only have 4, right? Let's take a look at this and let's think about how we're going to name this. First, let's count up all the carbons, right? How many carbons do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what is our prefix for 5 carbons? Pent. Okay. Now, let us also consider, is this alkane, alkene, or alkyne? Right? Since we have a double bond, we know this is alkene with an E. So I know my suffix is going to be ene. Right? So we might say, okay, this is called pentene. But what we like to do is we like to put some indication of where the double bond is. Because if I have a double bond here, and I have a double bond here, those are 2 different compounds, right? Having the double bond there makes this an entirely different compound. So what we want to do is we add a number to indicate where that double bond is. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to number the bonds and then put a number here to indicate which bond number that double bond is. Okay, and there's 2 ways that you could possibly number the bonds. You can number the bonds like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, or you could number the bonds like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. Which way is correct? The correct way is the way that gives you the smallest number for your double bond. Okay, so you see my numbers that I wrote on the top give me a 2 for my double bond. On the bottom give me a 3 for my double bond. So the correct way to number this particular one is like this. If my double bond had been over here, I would want to number it the other way, right? So which bond number is my double bond? It's bond number 2. So what we do is we put a 2 in front of that name. So this is called 2-pentene. Okay. If there were more than one double bond, then what we would do is we would put 2 numbers here, and we will put an additional prefix in between the organic prefix and the suffix to indicate how many there are. Let's take a look at an example of one of those, because that gets a little bit slightly more complex. Let's take a look at that. How about this one here? Okay, I have 4 carbons, so my organic prefix is bute. It's an alkene, so my suffix is ene. Notice I left a little bit of space there because I'm going to need to put something else in the middle there. We'll get there in 1 second. Let's see which bond numbers our carbons are. Okay, let's number the bonds. We can number them 1, 2, 3, or we could number them 1, 2, 3. Okay. In this particular case, it doesn't matter because I get double bonds on bond number 1 and 3, and the other way I get double bonds on bond number 1 and 3. So either way, it's the same, right? So I'm going to put the numbers 1 and 3, and I'm going to put a comma between them, so it doesn't look like a 13, right? So 1, 3, bute. And then what I need to do in the middle here is I need to insert a prefix to tell me how many double bonds there were. There are 2 double bonds here. Now the prefix that we're going to use here is not the organic prefix. It's different prefix. Okay, and these are the more regular prefixes. These are the ones we used when we talked about covalent compounds. And you can see with these prefixes, the prefix for 2 is di. So in the middle of the word here, I'm going to put di. So this particular compound is called 1,3-butadiene. How about this? This is probably about as complex as I can make it at this point before we learn the next parts of this in the next lesson. But let's take a look at this one and see if we can name this one. First, how many carbons do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what is the organic prefix for 5? Pent. Okay. This is an alkene because I have double bonds, so it's pent-ene. And then let's find our bond numbers. Which way should we number our bonds? Should I number them 1, 2, 3, 4? Or should I number them 1, 2, 3, 4? Well, the first way gives me the smallest numbers, right? I would end up with 1, 2, 4 versus 1, 3, 4. 1, 2, 4 is smaller than 1, 3, 4. So we have bonds on number 1, 2, and 4. And then we have to say, okay, what is our prefix for the number of double bonds? Take a look at our chart there. 3, we have 3 double bonds. 3 is tri. So I'm going to change pent into penta because it sounds nicer. Put a tri over there. Spread that out so it's more legible. So this particular one is called 1,2,4 pentatriene. Let's take a look at an alkyne. All the rules are exactly the same for an alkyne. So if you can do alkenes, you can also do alkynes. Let's take a look at an alkyne. Okay, see my triple bond there? This is an alkyne. So I'm gonna go about naming it exactly the same way as if it were an alkene. It's just I'm gonna make that suffix there yn, right? So first thing, let's count the carbon atoms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, 5. And that organic prefix for 5 is pent. Okay. Let's determine our bond numbers. So we can number bonds 1, 2, 3, 4, or we can number it 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. My triple bond is either on bond 3 or 2, and 2 gives me the lower number. So I'm going to go with that. 2 pent, and then the suffix for an alkyne is ya. If there's only one triple bond or only one double bond in the case of an alkene, you do not need to put a prefix in the middle there. So this is 2-pentyne. Okay, so there's how we name simple hydrocarbons, right? These are the simple ones. Next time, we'll go ahead and we'll draw the Lewis structures for these. We'll draw I'll give you the name and we'll draw the picture for them. Yeah, go home, take a look at your shampoo bottle, and I bet you some of the names of the ingredients will make a little bit more sense after that, right? So hopefully this helps us to be able to name organic compounds.